needs to be forward, right? Needs to be forward.
Good morning everyone, and we are very happy to have Professor Madhumuttam from Computer Science Department in IIT Madras, and he will be talking about data compression for multi-core memory systems in today's talk. His current research focuses on multi-core architectures, especially issues related to memory system design and network on chip. He is associated with programming languages, architecture and compiler education, PACELab, very interesting name. He is also a senior member of IEEE and ACM, and his RDOS number is 3. So please join me in welcoming Professor Madhumuttam. And Professor Madhumuttam, it's a great pleasure to have you. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So thanks, Vijay. So next 40 minutes or so, I will talk about data compression methods for multi-core memory systems. So a memory hierarchy typically looks like this. The CPU will be there, which has collection of registers and so on, and then there will be a multi-levels of cache hierarchy, and then L2 and so on, and last level cache LLC. And then there will be a memory. And so of course, whatever program processor wants to execute and so on, the program should be loaded into main memory, and from there it will bring the necessary instructions and data into the upper level caches and so on. And we know that as we move away from the CPU down towards the main memory, the access latency increases. At the same time, the capacity of memory increases, and the cost per bit reduces as we move away, and that's the reason why typically faster memory with the smaller size will be there in the L1, the next will be there in L2 and so on. So as long as we have most of our data in L1, L2, L3 caches, we don't have to make a trip to main memory, and that reduces our overall access latency and improves the performance. And there are several techniques proposed in the literature, such as efficient cache management in terms of cache replacement policies, cache partitioning if you are dealing with multiple applications running on a multi-core system. So at the same time, there are also a couple of other techniques, such as cache compression and prefetching. The cache compression is a technique which increases the effective cache size as long as if the data, whatever we are dealing with, has the property of compression. Because if the same data is repeated, or if the data has some pattern where the pattern can be captured and then we can compress, so that rather than dedicating 64 bytes of block space, we can compress everything into a 68 bytes or something, and we can use the remaining 48 bytes for something else. So that is what the cache compression mechanisms, and there are techniques proposed in the literature, and for our techniques we are going to consider based on the immediate compression proposed by CMU group as the basis, and we are going to compare our technique with that. And I will talk about what is VDA and how VDA compresses the data. And the next one is the prefetching. Prefetching can be done at the software level or at the hardware level. The software level prefetching is compiler will insert prefetch instructions so that you can bring the data in advance before actually the processor is requested. We prefetch the request, prefetch the data so that that data can be used when actually processor requests by generating a demand request and so on. So, but for our study, we are focusing on the hardware prefetchers, where typically we will have some hardware component which is going to look at what type of data access patterns are happening and what is going to be accessed in future, and accordingly the hardware unit, the prefetcher unit is going to prefetch that particular data into the LLC and subsequent caches also. But for our study, we are focusing on the prefetching at the LLC part. So, if we use a cache compression mechanism, cache capacity can be increased because we are compressing more and more data, and as a result, we can keep new data into the vector space. And the hardware prefetching, once we are bringing the data, and if the processor indeed actually requires this data in future, we don't have to actually go to the main memory, and that will reduce overall access latency. So these are the main points we are considering, and based on that we are proposing a set of the microarchitecture techniques at the last level cache as well as the memory, so that we'll see like how performance can be. So what is a data compression? So typically the data, whatever the applications are requesting, reading or writing, sometimes will have patterns like this. Sometimes the entire data will be all zeros. Let us say you have an array, we are initializing the array with zeros and so on. So you will have effectively only zeros will be. And sometimes we may have only narrow values. So even though we have a 64-byte block, the data is only 8 bytes of data will be there, and the remaining things are all zeros. Or sometimes we may have repeated values, where the same data is repeated in the entire block and so on. So as long as if we look at what is there inside the block, then we cannot get these type of things, and once we capture this, then we can think of how can we exploit this such that the effectiveness of the cache can be improved. And similarly, there is the technique base delta immediate. This is what is exploited by the CNU group to improve the cache effectiveness. I will give an example. See, for example, here in this 16-byte uncompressed block X, you can see here the same data is repeated. Rather than keeping this entire 16 bytes of data, one thing is like when you are reading the data, you have to spend energy also, because you have to bring that 16 bytes of data from memory to LLC to L2, L2 and so on. But if you look at the data, it's everything is same. All I have to do is I just put only 4 bytes of chunk in a compressed way, and the other things I'm not going to do. But now once I do this, then I have to have some metadata indicating that this is a compressed data where the next 3 blocks, next 4 bytes of chunks are already compressed into 8 and so on. We have to specify what type of compression we apply, so that when the processor is actually requesting the 16 bytes of data, it has to decompress that using this metadata. And for example, see here, in this case, the data is not same like this. It's 891, 892, 893 and so on. But if you observe, there is a pattern where it's 891, 892, 893, 894. An increment of 1. So this we can call it as a base, and then this will be the data. If you want to get the 4 byte data, all I have to do is I have to consider base and add that with the data. So that is what is the idea of base delta. You sum up the delta and the base, then you will get the corresponding chunk of data. And this is the idea that comes in BDA. And so this is published in I think Micro somewhere in 2012. Okay. So this is our best technique to compare our proposed techniques. So compression is achieved by exploiting such patterns that are available. And once we compress, then we'll have a compressed cache. And so compression frees up some space, and this space can be used for filling new data from the lower levels of memory, either main memory or other caches. And typically in a compressed cache, because once you have the new data you are bringing in, so you need to have corresponding tags also. Remember, in the tag memory, for every data block there is an associated tag, so that using the tag you know what block you are referring to and so on. So in order to use this compressed cache, compared to a conventional cache, the number of tags will be doubled and the number of data blocks also will be doubled. Let us say if I have a two-way associative cache, and if I'm going to use for a compressed cache, I can go for a four-way associative cache. In other words, without increasing the area overhead, I'm going to achieve a performance close to a four-way associative cache by applying a compression mechanism. So this is my generic cache, a two-way associative. For each data block, there is an associated tag. And if I'm using a BDA type of compression mechanism, then I will just go for double the tags and similarly double the data blocks. And of course, you can see here. So B0 is occupying in 16 bytes, B1 in 1 8-byte chunk, and B2 is there in 3 8 bytes, so 24 byte space. B3 is in 16 byte, depending on how the block is compressed. If the block is aggressively compressed, then I can actually keep it at 8 byte. If the block is not compressed at all, then I may have to use the complete 32 byte as it is and so on. Okay. And because now you can see the blocks will be compressed in different way. So as a result, we are also having a different encoding bits. So if I am compressing all zeros, so I will use an encoding of all zeros here. And if it is a repeated value, 899, 899, and so on, I may just use an encoding of 0001. And this encoding bits will be there in the metadata. So the moment my metadata has 0001, I know that this is a repeated value compression, so I decompress just by taking that and placing in the remaining positions and supply that to the processor or to the L2 or L1 caches and so on. So for everything, because this is happening at the LLC last level cache, before supplying the data to L2 or L1, so first what we have to do is we have to decompress, and decompression is nothing but by looking at this encoding pattern. We have to use that, we have to give that to the decoder, and then decoder will look at this, understand this is a repeated value or it is using some base data of different formats and so on, and then decompress and pack. Previously we compressed everything and we unpack that into a 64 byte or 32 byte and supply this particular data to the L2 cache. And this BXDY format is nothing but base is in 8 bytes and delta is in 1 byte or 2 bytes or 4 bytes and so on. And in our study, for example, in our examples, we consider B4 D1. So effectively like 4 bytes of base and then 1 byte of the delta we consider. And if we are using that, then we are going to consider 101 as the encoding pattern.
Yeah, I missed the introduction probably, but if I understand correctly, the data is uncompressed in the main memory.
Yes.
And when we are bringing it to L3 or whatever in the last level cache, at that time it is being compressed and it being supplied to the lower level caches.
So we compress and we compressed data will be placed in the LLC. And whenever we are supplying the data from LLC to the top levels, then we are going to decompress and then see.
So if L3 is my last level cache, then it will be compressed at the
LLC. Yeah.
L3 level and will go compressed to L2 as well as L1.
No. So the uncompressed data will be supplied to L2 and L1.
Okay, but compressed by inside and L3, right?
Yes.
So only the last level cache is keeping the compressed form.
Yes. And the last level cache is crucial, especially in the multi-core systems, where because your, for example, Core i7 Intel processor, if you take, typically L1, L2 are private to each core, and L3 is the one which is shared by all 4 cores.
So yes, last level cache is basically the which is.
So and also last level cache is the last resort, and if you miss there, then you have to go to main memory, and main memory takes like hundreds of cycles.
True.
So effectively, like because multiple applications are accessing LLC, you try to make use of this LLC space efficiently by using this compression mechanism.
No, my only concern is that what stops us from doing it at higher level caches.
That we can do, but the problem is typically if you see the latencies, access latencies, L1 access latency is typically 1 to 2 cycles, and L2 latency is 6 to 10 or 12 cycles, and the LLC, depending on the size, it may be like 20 to 30 cycles. So now for our this BDA type of compression, typically it takes 3 cycles of latency. Now if you put this compressed one in the L1, of course you can save the space, but for a normal 2 cycle access latency, now you are incurring extra decompression latency, that will unnecessarily penalize the system.
L1, yes, maybe no.
And L2 also, because L2 is a private only to the particular core. So the usage of the space, you can apply, but again it's a trade-off. So out of,
There are power implications as well. The design of the system primarily is towards performance, yes.
yes, yeah,
But if the design of the system also encompasses power goals,
yes,
I
but
see some advantages.
that's true. But the thing is, like, when you are talking about the power and the performance, maybe you have to look at energy delay product type of thing.
As of now, your focus is performance.
Yes, we are focusing on performance, and also we are looking at the energy, because we are mainly focusing on the multi-core part. And so far the current compression techniques are focusing on compressing the data within a block. And so if I have a uncompressed block X, which is 16 bytes, and which has this repeated data, then I can compress that into a single 4-byte data, so I can save 12 bytes of space. And assume that there is the next block, uncompressed block X plus 1, which is also having the same data. According to my BDA technique or any of the current techniques, that also again compress this into another 4 bytes. But if I look at this entire data together, actually I can compress that everything into single 4 byte. Right? Because this 889 is repeated in all this, then I can compress. But currently the techniques are focusing on only at the within a block compression. And the block is effectively its own microarchitectural parameter. And this has nothing to do with application characteristics. Application behavior is different from that of your microarchitectural parameter.
Is the cache line size 16 bytes? The cache line size is 16 bytes?
No, cache line, typically the current processors, the cache line size is 64 bytes. This is only for the example purpose we are discussing, but it's a 64
I
byte.
was thinking about, I have been thinking about misses. So what I have been thinking is that if, so basically this technique is compressing within a cache line, is it?
These current techniques are compressing the data within a cache block without losing any data. Whatever the data,
That I understand. My point is performance. So the currently, so I was just thinking, I don't know what the experiments say. So when we have a miss to a particular cache block,
yes.
right? So if I'm trying to compress the data, then what about the misses? So previously what were hits in the caches, now even those can be translated into misses, isn't it? So if I try to compress many blocks or
Yes.
many cache lines into one cache line, now previously there were 4 cache lines, let us say, and only one was missing. Let us say there were, so is an implicit assumption that when we access the cache lines, then all the cache lines are accessed in continuity or something? So what about the misses and the
No, I'll
replacement
tell you.
blocks?
So let us say I have 4 blocks, X1, X2, X3, X4. In the base cache design, I have these 4 blocks.
Okay.
And in my or any of the compressed cache designs, all these 4 blocks still be there, but only thing is, rather than taking 4 into 64 byte space, now they are taking only 64 byte space. Even if you want to access the processor generates a request for X2 block or X3 block or whatever, still that will be there in the compressed cache. Only thing is, you have to incur a decompression latency, that's it. Once you decompress, then you will get your data. A simple example is, see here, this is one block and this is another block.
So this does not have, so means the tag will get replicated, so all the cache replacement policy and everything, that will be associated. So my question is, what about the cache replacement policy?
Cache
So that
replacement-
does not, I think, figure in it at all, because we are still replicating the tag. So because the replacement policy is based upon the tag,
Yeah.
so there is no
Yes.
problem.
And also actually, we are going to get a benefit because previously we were storing 4 blocks in 4-way set-of cache. Now I compressed everything into one block. I have 3 block space. I am storing 3 new blocks also into this. Effectively, my compressed cache is, compared to the original one, is storing 7 blocks of data.
But the tag size is increasing, but I think the increase
Yeah, but
is
the
little bit.
tag overhead is not significant. For example, a 64 byte block, tag is 20 bits typically. So it's a 3 bytes of space. So
Okay.
you are slightly increasing the tag overhead, but you are getting more and more data in the data part, and that will give you an advantage. And that is
So how
also
does one decide, like at the runtime? So you said that there is some data which can be compressed, there is some data which cannot be compressed.
Yes, it's at the runtime only. Yes.
Yeah, but the hardware must decide, right? So whether I should occupy a let's say a reduced block size cache line or something, or whether I should occupy a fully compressed one. Then for some application, it might be the case that the entire data can be compressed. For some application, maybe nothing can be
Yes,
compressed.
yes, yes.
So there has to be a flexibility which is inbuilt within
But
the.
typically what happens is, in the,
Or do you partition maybe that that okay, some part of the data will go to this part of the cache which is.
no, we are not doing that. Typically, most of the compression techniques also will not do that. So what happens is, when you incur a miss in the cache, so cache replacement policy is going to identify a victim block because you have to store the new data. Meanwhile, you also send a request to the lower levels, that is the main memory or somewhere, to get the data. So now, because main memory access latency is hundreds of cycles, by the time you get the data, you have plenty of time to decide where to put the data.
Oh,
And now, once you get the data, you look at the pattern.
yes, that is the thing, na, that unless and until I get the data, I will not be able
Yes,
to
but
predict whether.
actually the cache optimization techniques are, what happens is, whenever there is a miss, once you get the data, you send the critical word first, whatever because processor is not requesting for 64-byte data.
Correct.
Processor is requesting only 32-bit data or 64-bit data.
Correct.
You supply this data
Correct.
and processor will work on its own, and then meanwhile you just look at what is going to, whether I can compress, because it's going to take 2 cycles or whatever.
Okay.
You look at this and accordingly you find the appropriate victim and then place it there. If it is not compressible, I just look at 64-byte space. If it is compressible into 8, I look at a victim which can be fit into 8 bytes. Okay, so that is actually, from the architectural research point of view, we call all these are like not in the critical part. So as a result, like you have some time, there is a time to,
all the overhead work.
yes, because like multiple things are happening in an overlap fashion, so
Yeah.
this will take care of. So this is one example, and the other one is, for example, the uncompressed block y and uncompressed block y plus 1, and it is following the pattern 891, 892, 893 and so on. If I consider VDI type of technique, it compresses entire thing into 8 bytes with the base and 4 delta items, and this also treated as another block with again base and so on. Okay, so but actually if I look at these two as 2 blocks and if I compress all these together, then I can just use one base and then 8 delta items and so on.
So this is implemented at the micro architecture level,
These are the hardware.
and the software has no control to disable it if it wants to.
No, but the hardware level you can do that. So the hardware level you can have the flexibility to whether you want to have it turn off. Yes, turn off. Because for example, some application, I'll show you the different applications there. Some applications will not have any compression thing and so on. So those
But
things.
that's what you are suggesting at the whole application level, right? When I run that application at the architecture level, I have an option to switch it off.
Yes.
My thinking is along the lines of a more fine-grained control.
Yes.
There's software which actually knows that this piece of data actually is highly correlated, thereby compression will help. When I move to this piece of data in my working set,
So
this basically is not going to get help, and there is unnecessary overhead, so I want to switch it off because that might be more smarter.
So it's effectively like your compiler will give some hints,
Yes, the compiler.
and now my architecture is going to read that hints, and then
It's just a
accordingly.
bit. I
Yeah,
say
yeah,
now
yeah.
you switch it on, now you switch it off. Okay, so then I can have a more fine.
But this is So we looked at only at the architecture level. So
People like us will do it.
yeah. Maybe you can give us the compiler insights, and then accordingly we can.
No, I won't give you.
I'll give you this, and then
You give me this, then we get.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so our proposal is compression across blocks because a block is only a microarchitectural feature, which is not capturing everything at the application level and so on, but the applications behave differently and you can actually get more advantage if you go beyond a single block and so on. And the same example if you consider, so I'll just consider this entire thing and put it into a 4 bytes, or if I consider these two, I can just have 12 bytes where everything can be placed, and I can still save another 4 bytes of space and so on. So multiple consecutive cache blocks can share the common data pattern or compressed together into a single zip block. Anyway, the rest of the talk, so when I say zip block or a compact block or so on, so all these are same, compression across multiple blocks. So a zip block stores only one set of encoding bits and a common base in total. And our baseline compression method is PDA, because we are building on top of, within a block if we are going to compress, then we are using the PDA technique, and multiple blocks will zip together. So I'll just explain how zip and unzip going to work. So let us say I have a block Y and this is the pattern. So I zip it using my VDA type of technique where base is 889 and 4 delta values are there. Next, my application requested block Y plus 1, which is also having this type of pattern. So the moment when I get a new block, I will run this through a compact unit to see whether this can be compacted or zipped together with an existing block. If it is so, then I just put it together. So for example, here 893, which is after 892 and so on. So I just consider 4, 5, 6, 7 here, and then I just zip. So effectively these block Y and block Y plus 1 are zipped together. And you can also see here encoding bits are 101. 101 already I mentioned in the previous slide, which is like a base is 4 and delta is 1. 4 bytes of base and 1 byte of delta are consumed, so that is represented as 101. And these are the valid bits. Initially, so in this I can store 4 blocks of space, and only one is set and the remaining 3 are 0. That indicates that remaining 3 positions are invalid, nothing is there, and only you have to read only the first one, that is this one. And the next one, when I add the Y plus 1 also zipped into this, then I am just considering these 4 corresponding to this 4. So now you can see here in this particular case I have 2 valid bits. First valid bit is corresponding to this and the second valid bit is corresponding to this. And similarly now one more request came, that is Y plus 2 block, that is also can be compacted with the existing one. Now I have added this 8, 9, 18. So I have 3 valid blocks and the base is this, and I am using an encoding scheme. Now let us say after zipping all these things, processor sends a request for block Y plus 1. It wants to read, let us say the data is not there in L2 or L1, and processor initiated a request to read the block Y plus 1. And we have the compacted data zipped block in L3. When I come to L3, I have to supply the requested data Y plus 1. So Y plus 1 will be taken by, because Y plus 1 corresponding to the middle one. So I'll just go to this 4, 5, 6, 7, and this will be added to this particular thing. My base is 889 plus 4, so that is 893, 894, 895. So that will be corresponding to 5 plus 1. Yeah, so here in this particular case we are considering, but in our study we are considering up to 8 blocks of zipping. And at the memory level we are considering a different value, and we will discuss that. But for the illustration purpose we are considering 4 zip blocks together. And any time, for example, if there is any change to any of the blocks and so on, all I have to do is, I'll just, for example, after some time processor writes some data to Y plus 1, and that Y plus 1, after writing, it cannot be compressible with the existing data. For example, after some time, 893 is replaced with 955 or something. Now this block cannot be placed along with this. So all I have to do is, I'll consider a separate block for that, and here I reset this particular bit. So it will only supply data for Y and Y plus 2, but not for Y plus 1, because Y plus 1 is now, it cannot be compressible. So that means like whenever you are trying to zip it, you just see whether it can be compacted with existing data or not. If it is not, then you have to keep it separately. As long as if you can keep it, then you can accumulate as many blocks as you want, depending on the limitation of your cache line size and so on. So based on this zipping and unzipping, so our main contributions are, we first focused on compressing or compacting only the prefetched blocks. And our work published in Transaction Computers 2016. And then we have extended our work saying that okay, not just the compressed prefetched blocks, even for the demand blocks also. And so this one is the minor review we submitted recently to BC and TACO. And this we have done both at the cache level and at the memory level. But the cache level, our objective is to increase the effective size of the cache, and the memory level, our objective is not to increase the memory size because we have enough memory and so on, but we were trying to use that for reducing the bandwidth requirement, so that not too many times you have to go to the main memory and so on, so that you can save hundreds of cycles, and that will improve your performance. And I'll just discuss these three briefly. And before going to the PVC technique, we'll see like whether there is a scope. Is there any scope for prefetch block compaction? So when we looked at the data at the LLC last level cache across multiple applications, this is the geometric mean. You can see here more than 40% of the blocks that are present in the last level cache are prefetch blocks.
So this is based upon real data or simulated data?
So these are the applications, the standard spec applications. You run it on the simulator. We use a Jump5 simulator, and we have collected the statistics, and
This is just the hybrid prefetch.
this is a hardware. So this is just
The default hardware prefetch.
yes, the
Very lovely.
stream based prefetcher is on in the system, and then accordingly we collected the data. Okay. So we can get this data on the real systems also, but after that, how can we modify? Because especially whatever we want to modify, it's at the microarchitecture level, and that you cannot do anything. So, and using a pin tool, you can get complete memory statistics.
Percentage of prefetched blocks means percentage in comparison to the total number of blocks that are being brought into the LLC.
Yes.
So around 40% are prefetched blocks and the rest are demand.
Demand.
So this is what the
Yes. Yes. And you can see some application, for example, Hammer, not many prefetch blocks are there. And whereas some application like Weaves and Leslie 3D, a significant amount of prefetch blocks are there. So the more the prefetching, sometimes it will be advantageous, but at the same time, it will be disadvantage also. Because it may
Hammer
pollute.
and Soflex in particular are pretty good.
Yeah.
They were actually, if I remember, the 90% time spent in Android is a lot of inference.
Yes.
And that inference is data dependent.
So you will not have any.
Because that hybrid prefetcher will go haywire.
And in that particular benchmarks, anyway, our technique will not be effective. So if I want to apply.
No, I always think in terms of supporting UI software.
Okay, but this is prefetched data, fine. But of this, how many blocks can be zipped together? Because that is also another component, right? If that is effective, then only we can apply our technique. So these are again the same benchmarks. Opportunity for prefetch block compaction, and this shows it cannot be compatible with any other blocks, and 2 to 8 blocks can be compacted together, and this 9 to 16 blocks, 17 to 24 blocks can be compacted together, and in some cases 25 to 32 blocks can be compacted together in a single tool. Of course, if you just go by majority, then uncompactable is significant, but we have to be optimistic, and we have to see like this component, which is like 30% of the blocks which are prefetched into the LLC can be compactable. In summary, out of 100 blocks present in the cache, 40 blocks are prefetched blocks, and in that 12 blocks can be compactable. So whatever we are proposing a PVC technique will be effective only for that 12 blocks. And if you compact this 12 blocks so that you release some space, this space can be used for putting other data into the LLC, and that may improve.
What is the hardware overhead because of this you are was compressing and decompressing?
Yeah, but
you
the-
are also predicting how much data is can be compressed.
No. So compression is a straightforward thing. Because for example, if you see the first slide, so we are looking at the repeated patterns or base delta type of thing. So all you have to do is like take that and then. So the compression, that's the reason why it is, because BDI, for example, if you go to the BDI paper, so the compression decompression logic, it takes 2 cycle latency, and it's just a simple addition. The decompression is nothing but take the base and add delta. in appropriate positions. So set of adders and that will give you. So the overhead is, yes, there will be some overhead in terms of the decompression and compression and decompression. The overhead in terms of extra multiple cycle latency, and of course when you are performing these hardware components it consumes energy, and the area overhead will be there because of these adders. But if you are looking at the overall system perspective, because if you are reducing the number of times going to the memory and so on, you are saving hundreds of cycles. Even if you are spending extra 2 cycles here, it is not going to give you the overhead. So you are incurring area and the energy overhead, but if you see the entire system-wide energy, because accessing the memory will take more energy compared to decompression and the compression logic energy. So of course nothing will come for free. There will be, you have to pay penalty somewhere, but if your returns are more than the penalty, then it will be fine. Okay. So there is an opportunity for compressing these prefetch blocks, and but you cannot directly use your conventional cache for this particular thing. The main reason is, for example, the conventional cache, this is our index function. So given an address, process generates an address divided into offset, index and tag fields, and based on the index you are going to go to one particular set, and for each of the set you have associated tag. You compare this tag with this tag wherever there is a match that says the cache hit, and you supply the data. If there is no match, that indicates that you cannot get the data and you have to go to the next one. So index is used here, and then the tag is compared, and based on that you will. But now we are trying to zip multiple blocks into the same block. So assume that block X and X plus 1 are zipped together, and now we are going to put it in a set Y. According to a conventional cache, what happens is subsequent blocks will be placed in subsequent sets. Because if you see this pattern, this offset is a block offset. The next block will go to the next set and so on. So now if I use a conventional cache with a zip logic, and if I want to search for X plus 1, I'll try to go to set Y plus 1, and I say like the data is not there. But actually Y plus 1 data is there with the zip block X and X plus 1. So that means we cannot use this generic cache as it is. Okay, so what we have done is modifications to the LLC. This is my conventional cache with M ways and the number of sets is S, and without increasing the total space occupied by this cache, we are constrained like this, where C1 cache contains the same number of sets, and the number of ways or the associativity is reduced from M to M minus N. So effectively we have a space for N ways and S sets. Okay, because you have only used M minus N ways. So remaining N ways space is there with S sets. So that space we are considering for another cache C2, and this cache is actually storing the compressed data, and this is going to store the uncompressed data. The moment I have a request and the block cannot be compressible, I just try to store in C1. If it is compressible with the existing data, I try to keep it here. Yeah.
So how does one decide this partition? So this is sort of partition, hardware-based partition.
Yes.
So how does?
Okay, so for that question, I'll just put it another way. So how do we design, let us say, if you consider Core i7 processor or whatever, how do we consider 16-way associated with so many sets and so on? So typically the hardware level, the design, what happens is, before you actually design a processor, you run with different benchmarks, lots of benchmarks and so on, and you study the behavior of, so whether I consider 16-way, the 16-way is better for my set of benchmarks, or 12-way is better, or 8-way is better, or whatever, or whether 4 MB of LLC is better or 2 MB of LLC is better. So the trade-offs will be there and so on. And based on that, they will come to a conclusion that okay, this is reasonable, which is going to give you.
It is trade-off based.
Yes, it's because there is no the standard way of saying that okay, you have to. But our objective is we don't want to take more space than the conventional cache, so that the comparison will be fair. The conventional cache, you have M ways and S sets, which is taking X amount of area, Here also we are taking the same thing, S into M minus 1 plus S1 into P put together, the space wise is equal to. So keeping that we are distributing. And so this one will be indexed using this function because we are compressing. So CB is the compressed block and NB is the number of blocks compressed together. Accordingly, we shift the index position towards the left so that multiple consecutive blocks can be zipped together and placed in that particular location. So whenever we access this, we use H2. Whenever we access this, we use H2.
So maybe it will go to 2017 also?
So 2017, I don't think. So maybe in the latest updates you can get it from spec.org.
No, this
Oh, this is the old one.
There is 216.
Yeah. So I don't have the afterwards. I think they are working on it, but I don't know what is the status right now.
It's based on only
Yeah, but yeah, because this is at least like that work. Last 2 years back we started, and then finally in 2016 it got accepted. So we use the old one.
And there was an interim benchmark was like E7
Okay.
before
The actual release of this.
before the actual release.
Okay, but we have not used that.
Well, they those probably can make your data looks better.
Yeah. So, but still people will use 2006 for some more time and.
Yeah, it's
Okay, so this is the overview of the PVC. When there is a request going to the memory, DRAM memory will supply a response, and this block will just check whether it is a prefetch block or not. If it is not prefetch block, we'll just go it the normal way. So send it to H1 and the C1 cache will store that data. And this is C1 and C2 are both at the LLC. And if it's a prefetch block, then I will send it to the compaction unit to see whether it can be compatible with the existing ones or zip with the existing one. If it is so, we just put it there. And this compaction unit also has a limited set of the buffers. And if the buffers are full, then we have to evict one of the things, and so that the new one can fit into that. So the evicted one will be sent to the C2 cache. And if it is not compatible with any of the data, then I'll just send it to the C1. But again, for example, hammer type of applications where you cannot compress at all, or you don't have any prefetch blocks and so on. In such scenarios, what is going to happen is your C2 cannot be used at all. Entire data will go to C1. So effectively, you are wasting the space. So that is where we consider like way balancer to see whether if the application is actually making use of both C1 and C2 efficiently. If it is not the case, if it is skewed towards only one particular thing, then we will route, even if it is compatible, we will route it to yeah, so the non-compatible one also will sometimes place it in the C2 because we want to make use of the space. Otherwise, like that will degrade the overall performance and so on. So this is where like it will, there will be counters. The counters dynamically incremented, and they will be evaluated, and based on that, the decision will be taken either to put it in C1 cache or the C2 cache. And we've split the benchmarks into compaction friendly and cache sensitive, and the definitions are like this. If more than 40% of the blocks are compatible, then we will consider as a CF. And if the performance is going to improve 10% by increasing the cache space from 1 MB to 2 MB at the LLC, then we will consider as a cache sensitive applications. And in our TC paper, we have given the detailed analysis application by application and so on. But due to lack of time, I am not going to give you the full results here. And we use a Java simulator infrastructure, which is a well-known, well-recognized simulator tool in the architectural community. And we use both 4-core and 8-core simulations, but for the presentation, I'm going to consider only 4-core results. And we've considered the weighted speedup. This is going to give you the performance improvement, and the harmonic speedup is going to give you performance as well as the fairness.
These are response time results or throughput results?
So these are like the, it's effectively IPC results, ratio of IPC, instructions per cycle. So in typically the processor performance is measured in terms of IPC and CPA. So you have how many instructions are there and how many cycles it took. The ratio of that is going to give you instructions per cycle. The reverse is going to tell you how many cycles. Lower CPI is better or higher IPC is better. Yeah, okay. Anyway, because for the
if you are adding hardware overhead I don't know, there will be cycle communication of increase notification.
Why?
There are no hardware changes.
Order change is there, yes, fine, but how does that?
None of them impact the amount of clocks.
No, that's not like, as long as you are, see, so whatever we have incorporated C1, C2, two caches, these two are working parallelly, and C1 size and C2 size is lesser than C. So as a result, like access time point of view, cache access latency of C is still higher than your C1 access latency and C2 access
And
latency.
all of these changes are automated.
Yes.
Clock speed will not regulate for sure.
If it is going to change, then automatically then, so you should not talk about then instructions per cycle, because frequency if it changes, then automatically you will have a different. Then you have to consult execution
If
time.
all the hardware changes are off the clock, critical clock, then maybe to clarify.
But the thing is that the changes here are, the cache is split into two caches, and then the other components are the compression and the decompression and the load balancer. These three components are.
Yeah, I think in this case it is clear. Okay, in most cases, for the most cases, I don't know, but in some cases people are able to publish result based upon IPC without even able to comment the associated information on the
Yeah,
clock
but-
speed.
Yeah, but
So
the
they
thing
are
is,
just playing around by making hardware complicated to
maybe
show something.
I'll put a word to that. So typically, if the papers published in the top conference like ISCA, Micro, HPC and so on, typically they'll give the detailed hardware specifications. And if that is not there, then so
Yeah, you don't know.
yeah. There are papers I also saw like so much changes, but
So at least in
the
HPC,
high-
at least in HPC, I know for sure there are quite a few papers published where they made hardware complicated
but they are
and
not
ask you
discussed.
in numbers and terms of improvement in IPC. I don't know how to digest that.
Okay. Yeah, that we can take it after.
Sure, we'll take it's more political discussion.
Yeah. And so because of the compression, we also reduce the miss count. So the lower is better here. And by the way, so these three are PVC and BDI, PVC plus BDI. PVC is like the compaction of only the prefetched blocks, and if a single block is there and which is not prefetched and so on, we are not going to compact them. And BDI is like it is compacting at the single block level. And PVC plus BDI is like even if a single block is there, we are compacting using this BDI technique. So that is the reason why like these are going to give you a better performance. How much time I have? Okay. Okay, so I'll just briefly touch upon this. When I planned the talk also, I thought of like maybe 2 months and so on, but I was like maybe overconfident to complete. Okay, so this is about not just the prefetched blocks, but even the demand blocks can be compact together. And if you see here the data, this is again geometric mean across several spec applications. So here this component is not compressible, but around 60% of the blocks, both prefetch and the demand put together, can be compressible. So this shows that yes, we can apply this at the cache level for even demand blocks. And when we are going for the zipping, then again number of blocks zipped together is going to, using that we have to shift our index bit so that accordingly we can index into our cache properly. And again at the base cache, the cache block level compression, we are using the BDI technique. So MBZIP-C is the technique we are applying at the cache level alone, LLC. And this is, as already mentioned, this is generic cache and this is the compressed cache, BDI. And this is our zip cache, where we may have some blocks which are not compressed at all, some blocks which can be compressed, some blocks, multiple blocks can be zipped together. So that's the reason why this data will have either uncompressed cache block of 64 bytes or a single block compressed but whose space is less than 64 bytes, or multiple blocks can be zipped together with a space 64 bytes, or multiple blocks can be zipped together, still it occupies less than 64 bytes. All combinations of data can be there in our cache. And we are using the double the tags, and so capital B indicates a zip block and the other things are showing the compressed block according to the BDI technique. And we also looked at the opportunity for zipping at the DRAM. And here also you can see, so one is like effectively it's not zipped together, and 2 to 5 blocks can be zipped together, this percentage, and 6 blocks. So effectively around 30% of the blocks at the main memory also can be zipped together. But now the thing is, we cannot straight away apply this at the DRAM because the organization of DRAM and DRAM memory and the organization of SRAM cache is completely different. In the caches, for every data block you have a tag, so that using the tag you know where the data starts. But in the DRAM memory there is no tag, so you don't know where the block I is going to start. In the conventional design, here at least I know because all blocks are taking 64 bytes. If I want to consider B4, I know that B4 is always starts here only because in the first 4 blocks are taking 64 bytes and so on. I know exact location. But if I am going to use this compression method where some blocks are compressed to less than 64 bytes, what is going to happen is you can see here B0 is put into 8 bytes and B1 may be like 16 bytes, B2 again 8 bytes, B3 is 8 bytes and so on. And if I want to access, for example, B4, I have to first know what is the size occupied by B0, B1, B2, B3 and add together and then only go to the particular location. You cannot do all these things at the memory level and so on. So then if that is the case, then we cannot exploit this zipping. What can be done? So that is where like we have come up with an idea. So what we have done is, fine, B0 is compressible into 8 bytes, but I am not going to actually reduce the space. I still keep B0 in 64 byte space, but remaining 48 byte space I will use to keep subsequent zip blocks into that. So what is the advantage I am going to get? Whenever if processor requests a data for B0, I will come here and I have a zip block which consists of B0, B1, B2, B3. I supply this 4 in a 64 byte space to the LLC, and the LLC will have that zip block and then it will supply whatever the block required. So unzip it and then send it. So in a way, what I am going to do is, in a single block transfer from DRAM memory to the LLC, I am transferring 4 blocks of data. My bandwidth requirement at the memory is reduced. I am not looking at increasing the effectiveness of main memory space. I am trying to reduce the bandwidth requirement. Because I have a compressed block, I just send this compressed block, which can be sometimes up to 6 blocks can be compressed together, so that in one go, I will just send 6 blocks of data to the LLC. Now, subsequently, if the processor requests B1, B2 or B3, it doesn't have to come to the memory and it will be supplied from there. So, you are eliminating unnecessary accesses to the DRAM memory, and that is what we have exploited here.
Does it also contribute to the LP cache?
L3 cache, still we are, in the L3 cache we are keeping only 64 bytes. So, this zip block we are placing in the L3 itself. But from L3 to L2 or L1, we are supplying individual blocks. That is where our unzipping is happening. So that means like from the conventional cache also, if you are using this, B0 you are keeping in L3 in 64 bytes. Same thing in the 64 byte space, we are still keeping B0 to B3. We are not polluting the cache and we are eliminating unnecessary bandwidth demand, and that will give you the advantage in terms of improving the performance. This is what the idea behind it.
But then you cannot zip the blocks again in the cache. So it can be done either at the memory or the cache.
No, I'll show you that. Okay. So these are some metadata related to that, and answering your question. So for example, I have this zip block from the memory got into L3, and after L3 data is supplied to L1 and so on, and processor modified some data, let's say B2 it is updated, and B2 data from L1 is evicted. It's a dirty data, so you have to write it to L2. From L2 also after some time it is evicted, so dirty data you have to write it. When you are writing the data from L2, write back data from L2 to L3, so you are again keeping the data here, because this B2 after modifying also, if it is zipped together, it can be placed here. If modified B2 data cannot be zipped together, then I'll just invalidate this particular, because metadata associated with that will indicate B2 is invalidated, but still B3 is valid with my data. After writing back, if B2 is also can be zipped together with this, then I have this particular data. Now what I am going to do is, if this block, zip block is going to be evicted from L3, now I have to write it to main memory. What is that I am going to do? So this entire block of data from LLC will be sent to the write back buffer, because in the computer system, whenever you are evicting some data from LLC which is a dirty, then you are not directly writing to the next level. You write it to a write back buffer, and from there you write it to read queue, write queue, and then finally send it to the memory. So we write it to this entire zip block data, we are sending it to DRAM through a write back queue, and it takes up only one entry in the write buffers, and then it will be placed in the write queue because we have to write it. So we are going to put it in the write queue. And now what we are going to do is, whenever we are going to write it to the DRAM page, we will actually start from this side. So first we take B3, which is dirty, because we know only B2 and B3 are dirty here, and B0, B1 you don't have to do anything. And my page initially has this type of data where B3 is here, B3 is here, B3 is here, and so on. Now B3 is updated, so all I have to do is I just write B3 in its actual location according to my original basic DRAM page. B0's original position is this, B1's original position is this, B2 original position is this, and B3 original position is this. So you write B3 only to the original position. In all other preceding ones, you just invalidate that particular. You are not doing anything, just resetting the corresponding valid bit. So B3 is invalidated, B3 is invalidated, B3 is invalidated. Now I just go to B2. Now I have to write B2. But B2 and B3 already zip together. What I am going to do is, I just write B2, B3 into this particular thing and invalidate B2 in the other positions. Now you can see this is modified with respect to original data, and after it is writing back to the memory, now you can clearly see updated data is there here, and updated zip data B2, B3 is still there, and this it is not there. And again, next time if it is zipped together with other things, you can still put the data and so on. So it is going to actually take care of your zipping and unzipping, and whatever the data modified at the processor level still can be reflected when you are writing back the data to the main. So the update invalidate happens in the metadata cache, and if there is a miss, a read request is generated to the metadata region of the DRAM cache. And the full details are there in the, of course, it's in the technical report, and so we submitted the minor version to TACO, but the preliminary version we sent it to PAC 2015 and published as a poster there. Okay, so last one minute. So this is MBZip life cycle. So a request, a response from the memory will come here, and so it will be, so from the secondary storage we will have the data in the DRAM memory, and then whenever there is a miss in the LNC, it will send a read request, and read request will be placed in the read queue, and from the read queue the memory controller will read that request and supply the data back to LNC. And so when it is supplying the data, it supplies the zip block to the LLC, and after that, whenever we are going to evict a zip block which is dirty from the LLC, we will write it to the write buffer, and from write buffer we write it to the write back queue, and from there we write it to the DRAM memory according to the procedure whatever I mentioned in the previous. Okay. Anyway, so these are the results again, the weighted speed up and the harmonic speed up, and this one is the, again, because now at the memory level we are looking at the bandwidth, and there is a reduction in the bandwidth because of applying this zipping multiple data in the DRAM. So these are some of the references, and this one is the BDI, base delta intermediate from the CW. Okay. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Professor. So, any further questions?
I have one question.
Ah.
Like when we are using these compression techniques, these are all lossless compression. And when this is the